Hey everybody, it's Rex Martinson with LOH Outfitters. I'm the general manager. We're going to be talking about archery hunting techniques for this fall's archery hunt.
Hey guys, it's Andre. I'm the lead guy down here at LOH Outfitters.
Okay, Andre, let's talk a little bit about what our clients, what the hunters are going to expect for September weather. It can vary, but it's still pretty warm here. What do you think hunters should be prepared for when they get here weather-wise?
Yeah, September is it's pretty diverse in terms of weather and temperature. You'll have big temperature swings throughout the day. Um, Early morning, it can be, somewhat chilly, 50s, and you can get up into the 80s during the midday, and then the afternoons, that's monsoon season, so flash storms are not untypical. So it's a good idea to have, lightweight rain gear in your pack, something you can throw on and throw off. It's not uncommon to get caught up in a rainstorm. Layering, layering is a big deal. We preach that to dress in layers. So in the morning, you'll want to have a vest on or a small jacket to kind of keep warm and break the chill. But you're going to notice as soon as you start hiking, you're going to want to be able to shed layers pretty fast and get down to a base layer that wicks moisture, keeps you cool, um, and so you can be comfortable all day long.
So that kind of brings up the question about a backpack, a day pack. We get a lot of questions about what kind of pack should I bring? How much stuff do I need to load? What would be your suggestion for a day pack situation for our clients coming out?
Yeah, that is a big question, Rex. And it kind of depends on what your expectations are as far as a, you know, packing out meat. A lot of guys want to participate in the pack out process. And if that's the case, I would recommend something that has meat hauling capabilities. I wouldn't say bring out a dedicated meat frame pack out, but I would definitely bring something out that has an internal frame with the ability to carry meat. I usually have a 3600 cubic inch pack somewhere around there. That gives me enough space for, my gear for the day, rain gear, all my kill kit, game bags, and it also turns into a frame pack if we're going to carry out meat.
Usually the guides will have a little bit bigger pack, wouldn't you say? And then, because they're going to be carrying perhaps a little extra gear than the client themselves. Uh, the weight of the pack, I think, is really important because some of the clients coming out aren't going to be maybe used to the altitude. They're maybe not quite used to hiking up the mountains like we are, but any suggestions on what they should throw in their pack or how, like a weight wise, what would be a good weight for them to shoot for as far as carrying gear and having things in their backpack?
Yeah, I think a lot of people really overthink what they need to bring in their pack, and that causes them to load their pack heavier than necessary. So the biggest thing that I want you to have in your pack is water. Water's pretty heavy, so if you have to shed a few items to add a little bit more water, I would definitely recommend that. You don't necessarily need to pack a spotting scope. I would say um, that's the least of your worries. We'll have spotting scopes. We'll have 15 by 56 binoculars, so we'll be able to spot long range. Um, I think water, snacks, obviously, your tag, just the essentials. We've created a packing list, and you should all have that by email by now on what to expect for the day, what to pack. Um, and I think that's a big thing is a lot of people really overthink what they need to bring in their pack, and that causes them to load up their pack. Another thing is if you have a big pack, it's kind of just human nature that you fill your pack to the brim because you have extra space, and that's not necessary. So a smaller pack isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as, if you're planning on packing out meat, just making sure it has meat hauling capabilities.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you 100% that if you do bring a big pack, you do want to fill it.
Yeah.
And you need to, for clients coming out, you need to kind of break that or bring a smaller pack so you're not encouraged to fill it up with things that you may not need. So one thing that I tell everybody is put in an extra pair of socks. Um, about halfway through the hunt, especially in September during archery season, those are long days and it can get warm. And if you have an extra pair of socks in your pack, whenever you stop for a break or lunch or something, you can sit there, take your boots off, change out your socks, open up your boots, sit there for an hour or two, relax, let things dry out. A new pair of socks will make you feel like a brand new man for the afternoon hunt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what to expect during the month of September for archery season as far as elk behavior. We've already talked about weather. It stays fairly consistent through the month of September weather-wise. But let's talk a little bit about rut activity and hunting tactics from the beginning of the first hunt to the very last hunt that we have in September. Andre, you want to let our clients know what to expect for September archery hunts?
Sure. So yeah, we tell everyone, the rut obviously kicks off in September. Um, and it's generally, it intensifies and gets better as September goes on. Um, so there's 2 seasons. September 1st through the 14th is the first season. We break those up into 2 6-day hunts. So you'll come out and hunt the 1st through the 6th, or the 8th through the 13th. The second season runs September 15th through the 24th. We'll break those up into 2 5-day hunts, 15 through 19, 20 through 24. Obviously, second season is everyone's go-to. Everyone, kind of fights for that second season just because, the rut is typically full-blown or getting pretty close to being full-blown around that time. That doesn't necessarily mean that the elk are not bugling and there's no rutting activity during the first season. In my opinion, the first season can be better in terms of success on herd bulls, and that in my opinion, that's just because hunting a herd bull and killing a herd bull and hunting a herd bull during full-blown rut don't necessarily go hand in hand. Yes, you'll hear herd bulls and you'll see herd bulls during the rut, but a lot of times they'll be haremmed up already. So they'll have 15 cows or whatever it may be. It's a lot harder to work a bull when he's got that many cows. Um, Sometimes it's easier to kill a bull before he's got cows and he's out looking and he's by himself and he just broke up from his bachelor group. He's got his nose in the ground, looking for that cow, and he's a lot more susceptible to a cow call at that time.
The first part of the season, I'm with you there. I think it's they're really not. They're kind of pre-rut. They're starting to get a little ruddy. There'll be some bugling, maybe not all day long, like you'll see later in the season. But they are starting to get a little ruddy. They're starting to get interested in checking out cows. So you can pull a pretty big bull that may hear a cow call or some calf calls. You can pull them in and get one of those bigger bulls to respond. Whereas during the heat of the rut, they're cowed up, they got their harem, and sometimes it's hard to call them away from that. So the first season really is pretty good. They're a little easier to pattern. We'll kind of know what they're doing. We've got game cameras out already, checking out behavior, finding out what waters they're going to. So we can throw a lot of tools at them. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox early. They're patterned. We're checking water holes, bedding areas. We can implement cow calls and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you may not hear as much bugling, but your chances of killing one of those big bulls is probably a little better, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would agree, definitely. Yeah, your hunting tactics definitely will transition as the elk transition closer and closer to the rut. Um, Another thing that we obviously take into account is the moon phase. Obviously, you know, a full moon is going to allow the elk to be up at night. A lot of times, we say is they party all night long when the moon's full, and they'll bugle their heads off. And then, once they see that sun start peeking up over the hill, they're kind of headed to their bedding areas, and they'll lay down for a lot longer on a full moon than they would with no moon, just because when it's dark outside, they're gonna take care of business when the sun's up.
So I'm looking at the September moon phase calendar. Looks like the new moon or the dark of the moon is September 11th. That's kind of toward the end of that first half. So September 1, we're coming out of the full moon. By September 3rd, we're at about a half moon. 3rd or 4th, we're at about a half moon, and it's starting to wane, as they call it, and toward the new moon. So again, this year with the moon phase, it seems like those first 2 weeks will be pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it's playing out good in terms of timing. Obviously, having less illumination early on in the season is going to be beneficial because the elk will be moving more throughout the day. Like Rex said, you're not going to be getting as much bugling, so chances are, with no moon, you'll get more bugles early season during the daylight hours, which will allow us to locate bulls and get in position to work them.
Yeah, one thing that we do, especially during September, and maybe depending on how the rut goes, maybe that first hunt in October, um, we're going to have some of our crew out at night from midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the morning, because they'll bugle at night, and it's a great opportunity for us to locate where those bulls are at, what canyons they're in, maybe where they're high activity locations that we can get in there. That let our guides know when they come out with a client, hey, we've been hearing bulls in this canyon. There's 2 or 3 working this area. So we're going to have some resources out there during the night locating where those bulls are at before our clients even hit the field.
Correct. Yeah, and that's huge, especially on full moons. Just because we don't have to play the game of going out locating elk and then being behind them. If we have someone there all night long and they have that intel and telling us, hey, this is the canyon they're in, a lot of times what we can do is we can set up and get up ahead of them, knowing which direction they're going to be heading in. So we'll be in position as the sun rises, um, and hopefully we'll be up in front of the herd. Um, we can get in position a little bit quicker if that's the case.
Okay, going back to the moon phase calendar, I'm seeing that the full moon is on the 26th, which that's the season's closed during that time. But it's going to start anywhere from the 16th. We've got a crescent moon. By the 18th, it's a half moon. So it's going to start brightening up at night with that moon phase going into the second. Um, during the second hunt in late September and going into the final hunt, the 20th through the 24th. It's going to be kind of light. So what would be your personal tactic, Andre, for that? Let's say that last hunt, the 20th through the 24th. What would be your ideal tactic while that moon is getting pretty bright?
Yeah, I mean, just getting out in front of them, learning where they're bedding, and trying to work them. Obviously, before they go on into bed. If we can't get it done, early morning before they've bedded down, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll kind of I'll kind of station up close to where they're bedding. I'm not gonna go hunt something in the thicket in their bedding zones and run the chance of blowing something out of their bedding areas. But what I will do is I will get as close as I comfortably can to that bedding area. A lot of times when it's a full moon, these elk they'll go to bed early, but you'll notice they'll get up midday and they'll kind of mill around midday. So you want to be out in the field, in that time frame between 10 and 2. And a lot of times that's a good time to kill a bull. He'll get up, he'll check cows. He might get up and go take a drink. So if there's a water source nearby, it might not be a bad idea to sit that water midday. Um, I definitely think on a full moon in September, it's a really good idea to stay out all day. Typically, we'll stay out all day regardless, but especially during a full moon, it's a good idea to stay out all day long.
So let's talk about a typical day in September. The days are long. So you mentioned being out all day. That could be a 14-hour expedition. From the time you leave camp at 4:30 in the morning and maybe don't even get back to camp for supper until 9, 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
Um, we do have some clients that will request to come back because they're tired or they're hot or they're hungry and they need a little bit of rest, which is fine. Uh, but we kind of encourage folks to stay out all day if they can. It just increases that opportunity. It gives you a little bit more time to study the elk and find them. Um, one of the big tactics out here, of course, is spot and stalk. We're going to get, when the activity kind of lays down a little bit first thing in the morning, we're going to find some high places and we're going to go out and try to locate where those elk are bedding and see if there's a good opportunity to stalk in on them. If not, then we may sit there and wait most of the day and try to put ourselves in position to catch them moving to a water location or in between where the bulls and the cows may be. Um, so, do you have any comments, Andre, on all day hunting like that?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. September's a grind. Um, for a lot of the guys, it's going to be 24 days straight, alarm ringing at 3:45, and you're not going to bed until 11:30. So it's long days. It's a grind. It's hot. So throughout that midday, after the chase is kind of done in the morning, it's pretty typical to find a nice shade tree, and kind of just hang your boots for a little bit, get a good glassing advantage, and just glass and keep an eye on the herd that you were stalking in the morning, and try and make a play midday. And then obviously in the evening they'll get up and they'll start getting ready to party again. So just staying in good position, hunting the wind, keeping the wind in your face, and just getting as close to these elk as you can. So whenever one of these bulls slips up, you're in position and you're ready to make a shot.
So one thing I want to talk about a little bit is the role of the spotter. A lot of our clients don't know exactly how we operate, but we have uh, contractors, spotters that come out and they'll actually their job is to find elk. Um, they'll be the ones going out at night and staying out all night long. They'll be the ones we'll change some of them out and put them out in the field in the midday through the evening, and they're just looking for elk. And then they can alert our guides with clients to where those elk are at. So I kind of want to promote or encourage our clients to hire a personal spotter. And when you do that, that spotter works exclusively with the guide and the client throughout the full 5 days of the hunt. This creates a great advantage to locate and find elk while the guide and client are out looking for elk and find an elk. You've got another person who's out looking for elk independently for that specific guide and that specific client throughout the entire 5 days. It increases the odds of finding an elk, and then it also increases the odds of you getting in on that elk. Now, we do have what we call floating spotters, and they're not assigned to a client. They're just out randomly looking for elk. And if they find a good one, they'll call the closest guide maybe, or they may share that information with other guides to get in there and find that elk. But the most advantageous is to hire your own spotter that's exclusive to you and your guide to help locate that elk. Uh, and the other advantage is when you do get an elk on the ground, that spotter then becomes a packer. And they're going to go in, they're going to help break that elk down, they're going to help pack it out. We'll try to send other people in there. We try to promote a strong team environment. If an elk goes down, we'll try to send as many as we can in there. But this guarantees that your spotter will come right in there, start breaking down that elk, start cutting up the meat, start packing up the packs, and get it out of there. So another thing that I want to mention, I mentioned paying for a personal spotter. The other thing to think about if you're coming out is the ability to add days to your hunt during the archery season. It's the only season that we can do that. Um, for example, if your scheduled dates are September 1 through 6, you could add on a couple extra days at the end of your hunt. If you haven't killed anything yet and you're getting close, or it seems like the activity's good, you want to add on days, you can do that. Be aware that we may have to change your guide because we do schedule those guides per hunt. If that particular guide that you've been hunting with is scheduled for another hunt, you may not have the same guide. We'll put a different guide in there, or maybe one of our spotters. And again, our spotters are guides as well. They just may not have a hunt that particular time, so we could set you up with a different guide for the extended hunt days. If you're on the second end of that, say the 8th through the 13th, you would only have one day to tack on the 14th, or you could tack days on to the beginning and come out a day or two early and get your extra days that way. So we can accommodate extra hunt days. If you want those, the best way is to let us know up front. Then we can schedule the guides, and we know who's going to have extra days. If you're in the middle or toward the end of your scheduled hunt, it's going to be a little bit more dicey, but we can still make it work for you. So keep that in mind, that you do have the option for extra days during the archery season. So we do get a lot of questions about what kind of gear they should bring, what kind of archery equipment. And Andre, do you have some suggestions for the clients coming out on what they should be prepared to bring as far as their archery equipment's concerned?
Obviously we want a good quality hunting, archery hunting setup. a bow, if you're pulling back, 60 to 70 pounds, um, that's sufficient. You want, an arrow that's somewhat heavy. I don't want you coming out with a whitetail setup. Will it do the job? Yes. Um, I tell everyone to try and shoot for an arrow weight that's 400 grains plus. Closer to 450 would be better. Um, we're not New Mexico. You are not required to use a fixed blade broadhead, so you can use um, expandables. I would recommend, I personally like fixed blade, cut on contact. When you hit something, it's cutting, but I'm not necessarily against doing, an expandable broadhead. As far as sights go, one thing that I really recommend doing is bringing out a sight that's got multiple pins. A lot of people will have a 1 or 2 pin sight with a slider. I like the idea of having a slider, but I also really like the idea of having multiple pins on your sight and your housing. A lot of times, when you're calling and you're working a bull, he's constantly moving, he's constantly closing distances or retreating a little bit. So if you've got 2 pins and it's 20-30 and he's moving and you're at full draw, there's a lot of questions start running through your head, and it's a lot better to have more pins. A 5-pin slider is great. A 5 or 7 pin fixed pin sight is great. Obviously, in my opinion, more is better in terms of pins in your sight.
I think the main thing that we kind of want to drive home is whatever you bring, make sure you're completely familiar with it, that you've practiced with it, that you're able to adjust in the heat of the moment. It's going to be, if you got a bull coming in, it's going to be exciting, and there's a lot of things that go in pre-shot to make your arrow hit that bull. And we're gonna, if we have a bull coming in or we're working a bull, we're gonna range certain areas. We may range some trees, we may range some things to give you some mental cues on where that elk's going to be and what range he's going to be at these certain physical features. Um, but it's going to be very exciting, and it's easy to forget which pin is 30 and which one's 40 and which one, in the heat of the moment, things can happen pretty fast. So you just need to be intimately familiar with your pin setup. And if you have the sliders and the adjustable pins, sometimes it's hard in that last few seconds to dial that in where you want it to be without getting busted by the elk. So make sure you're very familiar with the setup you have. Make sure you're comfortable with it. Um, 60 to 70 pounds is plenty for elk. Just make sure that it's a comfortable weight for you to draw. You don't want to be having a lot of movement with your bow when you're trying to draw, pointing it up to the sky and coming back down with it and that sort of thing. You want to be able to smooth draw that as best you can to minimize movement when that elk is getting in close. Um, Practice a lot with holding, pulling that bow back and holding it as long as you can. And if you're doing exercises in the gym, which hopefully you are, work on those back muscles and those shoulder muscles to get ready for that pull and hold scenario. Um, any other tips, Andre, you can give our clients for like how to practice on the range with archery equipment?
Yeah. And just to touch on what you said in terms of, draw weight, and what I tell everyone is to sit on your rear end and draw your bow back. And if you can draw your bow back comfortably, that's where your bow needs to be set at. I wouldn't sacrifice, 5 pounds of draw weight and you struggling to get that bow back for that 5 pounds. So if you can sit on your butt and comfortably draw your bow back and make a good shot, that's where your bow needs to be set at. Another thing is, it's hard to train for the adrenaline dump that you have, whenever you're working a bull and you first see him coming through the trees, and you see his antler tips coming over the tops, and your heart rate gets going crazy and everything starts moving fast. It's really hard to train on how to slow things down at that time. So, get your heart rate up, make a lot of shots with your heart rate up. Another thing is, don't shoot at distances that end in 0 and 5. Set your target, walk back, 20, 30 steps, turn around, range, and shoot. It's not going to be perfect. It's a lot of times it's not going to be 20. It's going to be 23, or it's not going to be 45. It's going to be 47. So just get comfortable at all those ranges. Know exactly how your bow is shooting. Watch the arc of your arrow. So if there's a bull standing on the other side of a bush, you'll know, hey, my arrow is going to arc over the top of this bush. So that's a shot I can make. Just that's the biggest thing I can stress is just take shots that you're not comfortable taking. Everyone shoots, yeah, I'm good at 40 yards standing up straight with my heart rate just normal. Well, how are you shooting at 47 with your heart going crazy and there's an obstacle in your way? There's a bush at 20 or 25. Like, what's my bow gonna do?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to get at here is practice with some quote real scenarios. Get your heart rate up, do some jumping jacks, do some push-ups, do whatever you got to do. Pick up your bow, pull and shoot, and see how that goes. Shoot from kneeling position, shoot leaning, because sometimes you will be leaning away from an obstacle one way or the other, and just practice some of these different real life scenarios to get ready for that last minute shot.
Yeah, and
So
another thing is when you're practicing, when you go out to do a practice session, maybe start practicing at 60 instead of starting at 20 and moving back. Maybe start at 60 and move in. Just so you're comfortable with all these different ranges.
practicing a lot, practicing often, practicing all these different scenarios is going to make you better prepared when that shot comes in. It's probably one of our biggest reasons why folks don't go home with an elk is they just haven't practiced for all those different scenarios that happen. And to me, it always comes down to the last 10 yards and the last 10 seconds. And that's what you've got to prepare mentally for is to be ready for those quick changes in those last few seconds of that hunt. Let's talk a little bit about releases. Practically everybody's using mechanical releases. There's a variety out there. Again, it's just what you're comfortable with. We recommend bringing an extra one in case you lose one or you forget it at camp or whatever, and you've always got an extra one in your pack. What would you say to that, Andre?
I would agree. Yeah, I would definitely recommend bringing out an extra release, something that's in good working condition, something you're comfortable with. Don't buy a release on your way to the airport coming out to the hunt. Get something and practice with it. We're not particular on the style. A lot of people will use a wrist strap. People will use back tension or thumb releases, and we're not particular on that. Just something that you're 100% confident and comfortable with and have used often and you're familiar with it.
Okay, Andre, let's talk a little bit about calling elk in. September is the time to use calls for sure. They're going to be bugling. We're going to be using cow calls. Some of our hunters are going to be experienced. They're going to be well versed in elk calling techniques, and some of them will have never called a elk before. Give our folks a little bit of guidance on how calling may go while they're out in the field.
Sure. Yeah. So, if I've got a guy personally who I'm hunting with, and he's a well-rounded elk hunter and has hunted elk a lot and he's proficient with the call, I don't necessarily mind kind of teaming up and working a bull as a team. I've found success in that. I'm not too proud to, admit that there's elk hunters out there that are probably better at it than I am, and I've killed elk with people who are better elk hunters than I am, and we just work as a team, and we've gotten it done. And then, like Rex said, there's some people who this is their first time out. They've never called an elk. To those guys, what I would say is just trust your guide. He's there for a reason. He knows what he's doing, and just listen to him and set up. You want to set up where he tells you to set up, and just let him work that bull. I think there's a lot of people who hunt turkeys who are familiar with running a call, and it is a lot like turkey hunting. So for those people who have that type of experience, it's real similar to that. As far as where you want to set up in front of the cover, not behind the cover. Find you some good shooting lanes and just kind of just sit still and let it happen. Don't make no noise, and just let it work.
Occasionally, the guide's going to be right there, whispering in your ear or working you through the scenario. And sometimes that guide may be back 20, 30 yards trying to call that elk past you. Any additional comments on that kind of a setup, Andre?
Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of times it's better to be able to drop back from your hunter and try and pull that bull past your hunter. If I'm standing right next to my client, that bull knows exactly where that sound's coming from, and he's going to come in looking for that spot. And if I'm standing right next to my client, a lot of times, that bull can see that spot before he gets there, and he'll hang up because he doesn't see what's making that noise. So it's definitely better to be able to drop back and call. I know there was a few years ago, Jerry, our owner, he called a bull in from, gosh, I don't know. He was literally a couple hundred yards back, and this bull worked straight into the client, and they got it on film, and they were able to make a shot on this bull, and Jerry was calling from a couple hundred yards behind him. It's not mandatory, you don't have to do it, but it is a little more effective to be able to call back. And if I have to drop back, I have to be able to trust that my client is going to stay in front of this tree and wait for the bull to work through this opening. Sometimes it happens quick and sometimes it doesn't. So you just got to be patient. And like I said, just let it work out.
Okay, so that's pretty much the conclusion of this episode of archery hunting with LOH. We plan on doing more of these, and we'll have one specific to our rifle hunters. We'll have one specific to our muzzleloader hunters. And the thing is, if you have any questions at any time prior to the hunt, please reach out to any one of us, Andre, Aria, or myself, and we'll answer your questions. We'll give you more information than you want or maybe even need, but we'll do everything we can to make your experience a great one and a successful one here in New Mexico.